Okay, so today we're going to begin the halachas of Pas Akum, but this includes, by way of introduction, so we know that the rabbis made a number of gzeros, a number of decrees pertaining to different types of food. Now, we're going to see that there were different, a lot of these decrees are different in nature. Some of them were out of concern that the food itself might not be kosher, and some of them are forbidden for an entirely different reason, namely intermarriage. So we're going to discuss Pas Akum, the bread baked by a non-Jew. Then we're going to move on to Bishul Akum, which is an item that was cooked by a non-Jew, so that foods, not baked goods. And then we're going to discuss Chalav Akum, which is it's a whole topic in its own right. The milk that was milked by a non-Jew, and finally Gvinas Akum. And then after all that, if we get to there's Yayin Akum, which is the wine of a non-Jew, and that's for a different reason. But we're going to focus on these four now. Pas Akum, and so why did they make these decrees? So the Shammai and Hillel, this happened during the time of Shammai and Hillel. We know that Shammai and Hillel enacted a number of decrees, and that's because at their time there was intermarriage was rampant, and they felt that they needed to make certain decrees to prevent mingling between Jews and non-Jews, and therefore they forbade certain things in order to prevent mingling. So bread is the chief example, right? Even that's the expression, breaking bread together. They didn't want people bringing bread together, and therefore they made a gzera against the Pas Akum, the bread that was baked by a non-Jew. Okay. Now we're going to see at times there was also concern for avodah zarah. Perhaps there was another element of the concern, and then perhaps coming too close they might influence us with avodah zarah. Well, Bishul Akum on the other hand, which is the next topic, that was more of a concern that they might put non-kosher foods inside. Okay, and in addition, we're also going to see that since bread is a greater staple, right? Bread is considered a chayi nefesh, and the person needs bread to live. So therefore, we're also going to see that they're more lenient when it came to bread than with other things. Okay, so with that in mind, let's just start the first halacha. That you're not allowed to eat the bread of idolatrous non-Jews. So right off the bat, we have to ask ourselves: is this only a concern for Obedei Avodah Zarah, people who worship idols, or even all non-Jews, right? Or even all non-Jews. So what would be the classic example? Muslims. The Rambam tells us, is not considered a form of idol worship. Christianity is a question, but Muslims for sure isn't, according to the Rambam. So what about their bread? So the answer is that ultimately the primary concern is going to be Mishum B'Noseiim, because we're afraid that people are going to mingle together and marry their daughters, and therefore even if they're not idolatrous, they are included in this decree Mishum Chasnas. The Rama adds, let's say we're dealing with a sect of non-Jews where there's no concern whatsoever of marrying their daughters. Well, who can tell me such a type of person? Priests. Right? Priests can't get married, they can't have kids, officially. So let's say perhaps one could argue that one should be allowed to marry their daughters because there's certainly no concern you're going to come to marry a priest's daughter. And the answer is that no, because it was a general concern and they forbade everything. However, only the 5 types of grain, but other types of bread, so rice, would not be a problem. Okay.
That's where it's kosher, by the way. You have to reiterate that the Jew don't.
Exactly. Oh, that's another good point. That's a very good point. Rabbi Teitelbaum makes a very good point. In fact, it used to be that bread was made of a few ingredients. So we're right off the bat we're talking about things that are inherently kosher, and on top of that they made a decree. But it's also important to remember that nowadays, and even though we're going to find that there are many kulos nowadays, because we're going to discuss pas palter, the bread of a bakery, and certainly if it's made in a factory. If it's made in a factory 3,000 miles away, are we really concerned that you're going to marry the factory owner's daughter? Probably don't even know who it is. So that's even if there's room for leniency on that end, but we have to understand that bread nowadays is there's I think over 100 ingredients I heard in your average bread that you buy in a supermarket, and therefore if a person has to be concerned. That's why you have to make sure there's a hechsher on there. So the hechsher is usually going to make sure that they've taken care of the Pas Akum aspect. But in any case, a person has to make sure it's kosher because it used to be much more. It was much more simple. In fact, yeah.
There's also a possibility that the goyim would eat at the Jew's house, So is anything being done to prevent that?
So that you mean to not. So we're going to see there are certain halachas pertaining to Pas Akum, the party of an andrew. You're not supposed to drink beer. We're going to get to there also. But it doesn't seem like they're concerned with inviting, as far as I know, having an andrew over to to partake of your bread. Doesn't seem like that was included in the Xer.
Because you're being nice to them, that's when they're being
Right.
nice to you.
Yeah, maybe that's more. Yeah, the other way around is more room for concern. Okay, what about, let's say it's a mummer. Let's say it's the bread of a mummer, is somebody who has completely left the fold and he's not religious. So it's interesting, and this gets back to what I was saying, that there's differences between the reason for enactment. So the Pesach Tshuva here, in regarding the bread of a non-Jew, he says, well, if the whole concern is you're going to marry their daughter, so he says there's no problem with marrying the daughter of somebody who's not religious. If somebody's father is not religious, but she's religious, you could certainly marry her. However, when in the next siman, which is regarding to Bishul Akum, which is the food cook, so there the concern is, again, not so much that they're going to marry the daughters, but rather the concern is they might slip in some non-kosher foods. So in that case, if the guy's not religious, then certainly one would not be allowed to. There, the Pesach Tshuva is stringent and says one should not eat their food. There's one other thing I was going to say. Did you ask me? Okay, so we'll end up there. That's the general introduction, and from here we're going to go on to the rest of Pas Akum and how it is that seemingly nowadays we seem to be less strict than we've seen from the times of Gemara.